What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here at About Trout, I do fly fishing how-tos, gear reviews, fly tying tutorials, vlog stuff, and today, hey, we're doing a Q&A. Nice little alliteration for you there. This is the third time I am shooting this video, and you know what they say, third time's the charm. First time, shot it in time lapse. Second time, I shot it with my wife, but we both kind of laughed and we're like, hey, this probably isn't that profesh feel, right? That in my $10,000 studio, right? So I'm back. We're here to do this. I really appreciate everybody for asking such great questions. I'm going to answer all of them for you. Some of them were a little more complex, so I just emailed those answers back out. Want to thank my friends at Moccasin Fly Club for this awesome hat. And without further ado, we're going to jump right into the old questions. Got them right here on my phone. I'm going to paraphrase some of the emails. I really appreciate, the positive feedback you guys have given me, and let's get this party started. Let's do it. All right, this first question is coming from Brett C. James, why do you think that mainstream guides and fly shops are so resistant to some European styles of fishing, especially nymphing out of a boat or lock style on lakes? These techniques work very well on all types of trout water and would put more fish in boats. Is the industry just stuck on certain techniques and equipment because that is what their inventory and marketing is geared towards? Brett. Thanks, Brett, for that great question. Coming in with the heat early on. So I think that with a lot of guides and fly shops, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. A guide's job, they're gonna wanna make sure to put the most fish in the boat or in the net as possible. So with all things being equal, if they can continue to put out excellent trips using indicator techniques or slip bobber techniques on lakes, they're gonna do that for you. If is the effort to take all that time off, to learn some new skill sets, gonna translate into more fish, given how productive they can be with their traditional techniques? I don't know. I just think, with newer techniques coming out, you see this stuff over and over again. I know Euro is here to stay. Lock style is definitely gonna start to explode in popularity as our rivers get more crowded. And more people will turn to lakes. But I think it's not that they're resistant to learn, it's they're just so good at what they've been doing for a while, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So Brett, I hope that answers that for you. On to the next one. This is from Brett with 2 T's, but also Brett C, my guy. My question is about setting up and building your fly box. I live in Utah and fishing high mountain lakes as well as rivers and streams. I recently have picked up the hobby of tying flies and was wondering what patterns you would recommend for building my river fly box. Size, weight, colors, and patterns. All right, thank you. Thank you, Brett C. So I think when you're building a fly box, the biggest thing, especially for river fishing, is going to be diversity of bead sizes. So having everything from big bombs, like 4.6 millimeter beads and lead, all the way down to like 2 millimeter beads, and of course unweighted flies. In Utah, I'm sure you're fishing rivers like the Provo, rivers like the Weber, tailwater fisheries. So small bugs work really well there, as well as big bugs. And then if you are tying, you can experiment by putting bigger beads on smaller hooks. So you get that small profile with the weight that you might need during high flows or more complex currents. Some great starter flies would be thread Frenchies, Perdigon style flies. You can't go wrong with, a Pat's rubber legs or girdle bug on a jig hook, waltz worms, RS2s. And I'm of the school of thought, I like to have kind of more muted natural patterns, and then I like to have some patterns with some pop in there, so like tag nymphs, like blow torches, mid tags, search and destroys, and then putting hot beads on stuff like a waltz worm or a hot bead on like a pheasant tail, something that's going to really pop in that stained water, but also during clear water sometimes you can elicit a strike. So also for the high mountain lake stuff, I would recommend some dry flies, stuff like stimulators, chubby Chernobyls, Jaeger 409s, Grillos' hippie stomper, and that should get you covered. I think that would be a great starting point. If you have any further questions, just feel free to shoot me an email, and we're gonna keep this party going. All right, this one's coming from my man Andy B. Looking for a good tip slash product to help keep my guides from icing up. I know about using something like chapstick, have my concerns for my line, rod, and have also read about Pam. Lots of questions about that. Anyway, looking for a practical guide tested idea that will allow me to fish longer before I have to pick ice out of the guides. I love my winter fishing since I generally have the river to myself. All right, Andy. Usually when I'm wade fishing, probably 99% of the time, I'm Euro nymphing. And so that thinner nylon leader going through the guides doesn't trap as much water as a traditional fly line. I haven't used it, I'll drop a link below, but Stanley's Ice Off Paste, it's a Loon product. I have buddies that use it and they swear by it. Unfortunately, the nature of the beast with winter fishing is clearing the ice out of the guides. That happened a few trips ago. But where I'm at, the temperature will start, sub-freezing, and it'll be in the 40s all through the winter on the San Juan. So check out Stanley's Ice Off Paste by Loon, and I hope that helps. Thanks for the question. All right, next one is from Greg K. What up about trout? What up, Greg? Brand spanking new to fly fishing for trout out of a raft. I'm from Western PA, so yeah, not the best place for trout fishing. I have a few stock trout rivers here that and there I can hit. I use it primarily in rivers for smallmouth on the fly. I think he's talking about he's using as a raft. What style of fishing would be good? What style I can read? Maybe if I was better at reading, I wouldn't be a fishing guide. What style fishing would you recommend for newbies? Nymphing with bobbers, basic streamers, both. There are plenty of videos that show people catching fish doing this, but not many that explain after the fly hits the water how to present the fly while standing in a moving boat. Or what should the rower do once the fly hits the water? Just looking for a video for getting started catching trout from a raft slash drift boat. Thank you. Thank you, Greg K. So that's a two-part question. The easiest thing is going to be indicator fishing. And if you're with new anglers, that's why, most guides guide with indicators because it's easier, even easier than dry dropper. The mass of the indicator makes it easier so you can get away with slop and casting. I've had my 4-year-old daughter hook trout out of my drift boat using an indicator. So I would highly recommend for newer anglers, if you're bringing friends that don't really fish, start them off on indicators. If all else fails, they can kind of use the weight of the indicator to cheat and put the flies where they need to put them. When fishing out of a drift boat or a raft, you want to cast downstream if you're using indicators, and you're going to use that boat to control the drift. You want that indicator floating like a leaf, drag-free drift, making sure your nymphs are getting to depth. And that's the job of the rower, to either speed up or slow the boat down to make sure you're getting those AA plus drifts. Ben and I did a video about that last year. I'll drop a link down below about fishing from a drift boat, and same applies for a raft. But I hope that helps, Greg. Thanks for the question, and we're gonna moonwalk into the next question. All right, this comes from Christopher H. I am interested in Euro nymphing. Just started fly fishing about a year ago. What is a good Euro outfit that won't break the bank? What is a good weight to start with? I like the idea of an outfit because I would like to have something that is set up properly at the start time before I start messing it up. Got to keep it family friendly there. Also, I am not familiar with all the leaders, etc. An outfit seems like an easy way to get started. Thanks. All right, Chris, that's a great question. So like your standard trout rod, or your entry level trout rod is the 9-foot 5 weight. You'll hear that in most areas of the country. Your standard Euro rod's gonna be like your 10-foot 3 weight. In terms of like a good entry level rod, you have like the Echo Shadow 2, but also the Carbon XL, the Echo Carbon XL. That's a really good option, and I think the price point is around $159 or $169. If you already own, I would assume you already have like a 9-foot 5 weight, you can put the reel that you own on that 10-foot 3 weight and then fish a really long leader. One of the first videos I did on this channel was kind of a good like entry level Euro leader. Just make the butt section like 30 feet, and I'll link that video down below. So you'll save some coin. Outfits can be, there's some good ones, there's some bad ones. Echo's got an awesome warranty, so if you snap the tip, they'll send you a new one, but that's my 2 cents. Echo Carbon XL, 10-foot 3 weight, use the reel you already have. And then the leader formula, Rio makes a product that you can just buy right over the counter. and then you can just tie your own. So I hope that helps, and I'll link that video down below. Thanks a lot, Chris. All right, this is from Brian B. Just wondering if you still guide during the winter. If so, what are your rates? My rates are on my website, Brian, but I guide all winter long, the never-ending season. Unfortunately, the San Juan is currently closed to out-of-state residents, so that's making things a little bit tough, but we're expecting things to open up here soon. But the San Juan's a tremendous winter fishery, and it's great. The weather will still be in the 40s. There will be a lot less people out there. You can still throw dry flies, nymphs, streamers. So I highly recommend anyone that's booking me kind of January through April or through March. I try to push all my trips to the San Juan. So hope that helps. Great question. Let's shimmy over into the next one. All right, Clayton B, let's get it. Q&A, ready for the heat? Exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. I was born ready. The questions. Let's get small. What are your go-to midge patterns for winter wade fishing, and how small are you going? Attractor patterns. In the spring, summer, about every fisherman is on a leech or a PRL, Pat's Rubber Legs, Colorado. Or if you're from the East Coast, throw my E's up. I think it's this one. We call them girdle bugs, baby. What patterns do you use as an attractor to separate yourself from the pack? Worms, San Juan worms, squirmy, and spanflex worms. Preference? Is there a superior worm in your opinion? All right, those are all related, so let me answer that. So when I'm wade fishing, in the winter time, I'm definitely gonna be banging an egg or a leech, and then I'll fish a midge in conjunction with that. So typically, like my favorite midge pattern is gonna be a foam back, anywhere from a size, 22 down to a 28, but I'm usually in that 22 to 26 mostly. In the winter, you have to decide, the fish will tell you off the bat if they're on junk or not. Junk is just a guide slang for eggs, leeches, and worms. On the San Juan, there's kind of like a line drawn in the sand with the guide community. So while I am a believer that the squirmy worm is the superior worm, I don't throw them out there. I fish them pretty much everywhere else. Out there, spanflex worms are great. I believe that was invented by one of the guides out there, Brad Miller. It's an awesome, awesome fly. And then you can't, classics never die. San Juan worms are great, but I think go Span Juan or go squirmy worm. And then in terms of separating myself from the pack, I really believe in POE, presentation over everything. So yes, I will be throwing stonefly patterns during the runoff, especially when I guide in the Conejos Valley or I'm fishing kind of in the Chama Valley where I live. In terms of separating myself, just throwing like a hot bead on some of those stonefly patterns, like an orange bead or a pink bead, white bead to give it some pop, something a little bit different. But I think, again, it's more about, especially during high flows, during runoff, when people are throwing that stuff, being more choosy with the water that you fish. So I'm fishing really close to the banks, right? I'm really looking for those slower pockets created by rocks. Trout are really lazy, so during high flow, they're either gonna be where there's more friction points, a la behind rocks, in front of rocks with that hydraulic cushion, and on the banks. And then they'll also just be tanked dead center of the river in the deepest runs that you usually can't fish at that flow. So something to think about there. Really good question. And then you followed up, Clayton, with wild fishing stories. Well, in terms of wild fishing stories, I've killed a few rattlesnakes on guide trips. I like snakes a lot, so that's always hard, but God forbid. I'm only gonna go out of my way I'm only gonna kill a rattlesnake if it's like in the middle of a trail, and the rattlesnakes that I've killed, I've almost stepped on. So, I'd never forgive myself if a guide buddy or my client got bit by a rattlesnake when I have no cell phone service in the middle of nowhere. I did have one encounter where I was guiding in a pretty sketchy place and a guy walked up with a knife. It was really weird. He was like, "Why are you backing up?" I'm like, "Well, cause you're holding a knife." And I was guiding. And anyway, we threw that guy some tobacco products, called the police. They were aware of the situation. And then we flipped a canoe in college while fishing, was not wearing a life vest. I've never made that mistake again. And I got pinned to what's called a sweeper or a strainer. So I was pinned to a log, and thank God the water was shallow. So I was under the water, the current had me pinned to the log. It was only 4 feet deep. I stood up and I was good to go, but I've never made that mistake again. So accidents can happen in a split second, but no bear attacks. Hopefully that never happens. So great questions, Clayton B. And then you just asked about an etiquette video. With etiquette, you know, there's nuance to it. Generally, the more crowded a river, the less space you need to give somebody. If it's a really remote area, remember that those other anglers are there for the same reason that you are. So you can alleviate 99% of your conflicts by just talking to somebody. Hey, what are you doing? What's your plan? If they got there first, you know, find something that's going to be mutually beneficial. Maybe they can't hike as far as you, so you can say, hey, I'm going to go up, you know, 45 minutes. I'm not going to touch anything until I get to spot X. But yeah, with etiquette, talking is always the best answer, and trying to, you know, what's going to work best for the both of you or for both parties involved. The other thing with etiquette is, like, you know, sometimes, like, if you're fishing like a heavily stocked area, they just stocked it, you know that it's going to get rowdy. So expect the worst, you know, prepare for the worst, you know, if you're fishing really, really heavily stocked spots, because that's where you're going to see the worst etiquette. And I think it's just because that tends to attract a lot of anglers that they're not, you know, they're people that fish. They're not necessarily, you know, fishermen. So hope that helps, and let's jump into the next question. All right, this comes from Beards B. What do you think is the most overrated must-have to do in trout fishing? Everyone says you have to do it on your own, but you really don't. Cheers, Bo. That's kind of a loaded question, you know, because what I might think is not cool, people on this channel or my clients or my friends might think is really, really cool, and vice versa. So I don't want to knock a certain fishery, but I will say I think the most overrated thing in fly fishing right now are rod vaults. Mine's buried under like 3 feet of snow right now. So when I dig that out, I'll probably sell it, but they beat up your rods, you know, and when I'm guiding back to back to back to back to back, it can be nice, but it's just not worth the hassle. And if you're not fishing, you know, 10, 15, 20 days in a row, having something like a rod sumo, I'll link that down below, with magnets or suction cups, it'll help you bounce from point A to point B with your rods already rigged up, is probably the way to go. So rod vaults, most overrated. There, I said it. Hammering away. This is from Eric C. Couple questions here. First one, do you think sizing down to small nymphs in winter is necessary on a Euro rig? If so, what changes do you make to the technique to adjust for the reduced flyweight? If not, can you explain your rationale? That is an excellent question. So I just guided a Euro trip on the Juan 2 days ago. So I'm usually gonna go depth or slightly longer than depth to my dropper fly, right? Or my tag. And then I'll run about 24 to 28 inches, depending on where I think, you know, if there's fish kind of mid-column or suspended, to like a 22 or a 26, you know, kind of hit them with both things. But usually my weight is gonna be in the form of a weighted leech or a weighted egg, and I'll just fish a heavier pattern to compensate. So usually like around a 3.3 millimeter bead. Some days, you know, it's like 90% they're on the leech. So if that's the case, maybe I'll throw something like a little bigger. Like the winning combination on my last trip was a weighted ecstasy egg, and then I was going about 24 inches to what my buddy calls a Justin Zebra, which is just a zebra midge jig with a tag, 2 mil bead, size 18 hook. So I'm gonna use the weight if they're really hard on midges, you know, and some days it's 90% on the midge, and the other days it's like 90% on the junk fly that I'm using as my weight. I've also done really well throwing like really small, like double 2.4 and like double 2.8 bead sizes, in little perdigones, thread Frenchies, things like that. So something to consider. But excellent question, Eric. Did I make a New Year's resolution for 2021? Absolutely. After all this nonsense, I hope to join a gym and kind of shed some extra lbs, get my dad bod nice and toned. And then any close calls that scared me, I think I answered that on my last question, just kind of that dude with the knife flipping a canoe, and then just almost stepping on rattlesnakes on a few guide trips. But I would say my time on the water is has been pretty mellow and relaxing. So no bear attacks. That's the second time I've been asked that. Maybe I should start maybe I should start anticipating it, right? But great questions, Eric, and let's do the next one. This question is coming from Brian, Dutch last name, and fun fact, Gerritsen is Dutch. I did like a DNA test, I think I'm like 4%, but hey, the last name stuck. Talk to me about the inflatable PFDs you are wearing on your boat. My research says that it's not legal on rivers. I have a drift boat, looks just like Ben's, and float the Eagle, the Arc, the Colorado, the Blue, Gray's Reef, and the Green below Flaming Gorge. Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. When and where can I wear an inflatable PFD, and what is your recommended product? So I use the Onyx M16, that inflatable vest, and on the San Juan it is legal. Usually when I'm floating in like Colorado and Wyoming, I'm in my buddies' boats and they guide in those places, so I just wear the PFDs that they provide. Now in some of those rivers that you mentioned, you don't have to wear PFDs on certain sections and things like that. I always wear a PFD, and on rivers like the Colorado and on the Arkansas, the Blue, I would want a life vest. If the worst happens, those are rockier rivers, swifter currents, and that belt vest, you know, you might not have the time to reach over and deploy it. As far as I know, in New Mexico, you know, those belt vests are 100% legal. They're probably, maybe they are, according to your research, illegal in those places. But always, always, always check your state and local laws. But hey, if you come down and want to float New Mexico and don't want to deal with a life vest, that belt vest is great. I'll drop a link down below. But again, I can't stress it enough, check state and local laws. It's going to be different all throughout the West. But great question. Let's go on to the next one. This one is from Cody R. How do you become a fly fishing guide? I'm only in high school but have a huge passion for fly fishing, and I was wondering the steps you need to take to become one. From Cody. Cody, send me a follow-up email. I'll go into way more detail than I want to go on this channel. But basically, there's different routes that you can go. There's different types of fishing guides, and it depends where you really want to take it. But the best thing to do, I would say, if you're gonna do a guide school, do not take a guide school that doesn't offer a rower certification. That rower cert's gonna, like for example, right now I can't guide float trips in Colorado because I don't have what's called a TL. So I'll probably get that certification later. So go to a guide school, if you do go to a guide school that has a rower's, some sort of rower certification, whitewater rescue. But probably the best thing you can do, because the way the insurance is written now is when you're 18, you'll be able to get you'll be insured to be a fishing guide, is get a job in Alaska. You're gonna meet a lot of people around your age and older, make those industry connections, and you'll eventually get a trip. It might not be your first season, it might be your second season, but a season in Alaska, I promise, will supersede guide school for sure. But I wanna give you a really detailed information. So Cody, please send me a follow-up email. And to all those wondering about becoming a fishing guide, sometimes it's easy as just going and doing it. Being a guide is different depending on what state you're in. Do you have to have permits for certain rivers in some states? Some states there's loopholes. You don't need a guide license. Like in New Mexico, I don't need a guide license to be a fishing guide. When I guide private water in Colorado, I am a Colorado outfitter number 3300. And that allows me to guide private. I can't get permits for public water in Colorado and the surrounding areas. They've all been taken. So these are things to consider when you're thinking about being a fishing guide. Do you want to be independent? Do you want to be a contract guide? There's layers and layers and layers, but I'm happy to help in any capacity, Cody, so just let me know. All right, next question. This is from Benjamin B. I've been considering picking up a 10-foot 4-weight for a while now to upgrade my dry fly and dry dropper game. The rivers I fish around the Seattle area are full of pocket water that tends to require some high quality mending and line management to navigate. I've also been thinking about trying my hand at the Euro game. Question for you is around multi-purpose rods like an Echo Shadow 2 that claim to be Euro nymphing specialists but also love to cast dries. Are there dual purpose rods really capable of excelling at both roles? Or would I be better suited buying a Euro specific and a dry fly specific rod? Any suggestion on a rod that would meet that criteria? I'm down to spend a fair amount if that means buying 1 versus 2 rods. Keep it steezy, say hi to Chaz for me next time you see him. I will. Ben, excellent question. So, fun fact, I used to work at Avid Angler, right outside of Seattle for Ryan Smith. I see your area code. It looks like you're from the east side of the state. The Echo Shadow 2 is going to be able to turn over dry dropper rigs, and it's going to be an awesome Euro nymphing rod as well. It definitely is more of a crossover, and it's a great way to get your feet wet in the Euro nymphing technique, but also you're still going to be able to throw dry droppers and dry flies with accuracy. My suggestion would be just fishing a standard weight forward 3-weight fly line on that setup and just running a super long Euro leader with like a 30-foot butt section. And that, you know, if you want to throw indicator rigs or dry dropper rigs, you know, you could take off the leader, put on a tapered leader, but if you're fishing a thicker Euro leader formula, you can certainly turn over shorter dry dropper rigs, and I do that a lot here in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. So highly recommend the Shadow 2. It's a great do-it-all rod. If you had a little more money, you can't beat a 10.5-foot Shadow X. So I would say maybe look there. 10.5-foot 3-weight would be just kind of a great all-arounder, and it'll still be able to, you know, roll cast like a machine, and it's very, very accurate. Especially if you're fishing a thicker Euro formula, you can just throw double unweighted dries or a single unweighted dry with relative ease. So hope that helps. Thanks again for the question. All right, this is from my guy, Michael T. Not sure if you've ever answered this in any of your videos, but what makes a fly a Euro nymph versus a regular beadhead? Thanks, Mike. Great question. There's definitely a lot of confusion about that one. So, you know, Euro nymphs, there's not, so short answer, there's not like Euro nymphs. There's nymphs that are designed with the intention to be fished Euro style, but you can fish them under a dry fly, you can fish them with an indicator rig. I think what most people think of like a Euro nymph is just anything tied on a jig hook, which are becoming more and more popular in all facets of the sport. But you know, your typical old school Euro specific flies were, you know, tied on check style hooks, jig hooks, things of that nature. Euro flies, you know, a lot of them are from Europe and they're tied in that European style, so very sparse, thin, you know, CDC, mixed materials, color grading, but there is no, like, this is a Euro nymph. You know, there are lots of tungsten beads, right? Because you're not adding additional weight to your leader setup when you're Euro nymphing. But the way that nymphing, indicator nymphing has gone over the last, you know, 10 years since I've been doing this. I mean, I remember working at Orvis at 14 and, you know, half the flies didn't come with beads on them. And then it was, everything had a brass bead, and now tungsten is as prevalent. And a lot of guides, myself included, when I'm guiding an indicator rig, outside of the wand, I'm gonna throw tungsten beads under an indicator. So there's not necessarily like Euro nymphs. Any nymph can be Euro nymphed, if that makes sense. But you're probably thinking more of like just jig flies. But the way that it's gone, you can throw those under an indicator. You know, you don't have to just use those for Euro nymphing. So Michael, I hope that clears that. I hope that clears things up. But you know, they're all nymphs. But great question. There's a lot of confusion about that. Hopefully I cleared that up for you. This one's coming from Ryan T. James, my name is Ryan and I'm from Northern British Columbia. Thanks for the videos. My question is, I'm getting started in Euro nymphing. I would like to start but don't know where. I have a 9.5-foot 6-weight and I'm guessing it's probably too stiff. Should I buy a new setup or can I buy a kit from someone like Scientific Anglers that makes a 20-foot section of Euro line that I can put on the end of my floating line? Thanks again. Keep the videos coming. Thank you, Ryan. I'll put it to you this way. I'm sure you're kind of getting it done with your 9.5-foot 6-weight, but if I had a 7-foot 3-weight, I could throw streamers with it, but it wouldn't be complementary to the techniques. The way that Euro rods are designed, they have very responsive tips, so they snap back to neutral. They get tight so you can read that sighter better. They'll flex down into the cork to protect your lighter tippets, and they're designed to load under their own mass. So I've had clients that have certainly Euro nymphed with like 9'5" weights. It's tough for the casting because they don't load under their own mass. You're using the mass of the beads to turn over the rig. So I would recommend just getting a Euro specific setup. If you don't want to break the bank, I would say that Echo Carbon XL in a 10'3" weight. You could use your 6-weight reel that you already own. You could put a cheater line on there, like that SA line, and loop it to the front of your 6-weight, and then run like a really long butt section on your leader. And that's what I would recommend. So definitely get a Euro specific rod. It's gonna increase your experience exponentially. Just as if I had a 3-weight, I'm not gonna be able to throw heavy sink tips and articulated flies for streamer fishing as easily as I would with a 9.5-foot 6-weight. So hope that helps. If you had a little more coin for British Columbia, I really like the 11-foot 3-weight Shadow X. It's gonna have a little bit more backbone for some of those bigger fish up there, and you'll really, really dig it. So Ryan, excellent question, and we're moving on to the next one. Anthony M, I see your question, my guy. I do not sell those described products. You'll have to ask Chaz for that one. All right, moving on to Joshua S. And his question is, when moving from shallow water to deeper water, I'm sometimes forced to submerge a segment of the sighter below the water to ensure I'm still bouncing bottom. Will the colored mono material spook fish? What would you recommend? Just adding additional tippet? Would you recommend just adding additional tippet material instead? Josh. All right, Josh, you know, and I've read all these questions before. Again, this is my 3rd time shooting this video, but I get a lot of questions about bouncing the bottom. There's definitely a time and a place, but you don't always have to be on the bottom. And in fact, most times I'm not. Trout are most likely going to tilt their head up to eat insects drifting down. They don't have inferior mouths like a carp, right, or a bonefish, kind of under the jaw. So you don't always have to be ticking the bottom. If you're moving from shallow to deeper, and back to your point, I do not think the colored nylon, if it's that far away, is gonna spook fish. It's gonna float over their head. Now, it can, but for most cases, I think you're pretty good. Usually, to get around that, I really hate having my sighter touch, depending on how thick your sighter is. If it catches the current, it can cause a disconnect from the connection of your flies because it's a thicker nylon, and it's gonna drag more than your thinner nylon coming off the tippet ring or your thinner fluorocarbon. So usually when I'm rigging, in my mind, I'm gonna rig slightly deeper than the deepest spot that I'm gonna fish. Because of those drag forces, there's gonna be a curve when you're leading your flies, so you wanna be a little bit longer to get max depth. If you're going to shorter water and you feel like you're too long, there's a product called Scarfer's Wax. You can hit your tippet with it and basically create a new sighter, and that can help you a lot. So things to consider, Josh. Thanks for checking out the channel, and I hope that answered the question for you. All right, moving on. This is from Griffin M. I'm new to Euro nymphing. I love it so far, and I'm already connecting with more fish than when indicator fishing, but I have a question about tension. I'm having a little trouble recognizing if I'm keeping my flies at the right depth. Clearly keeping the line somewhat tight is fundamental here, but how can I tell whether I'm keeping adequate tension or am I pulling the flies too far off the bottom? I know that I will be able to read this better with experience, but do you have any tips for a beginner? Thanks, man, Griff. Yeah, I mean, I think don't get so hung up on fishing like just a straight linear path through the water column. Those flies, when you're casting, even on an indicator rig, they're dropping, come to depth, and you're fishing basically like a hammock, right? So if you're fishing a fixed line, you fish your 1U, and then you take a couple steps up and start to link them. You're fishing the bottom like this through the water column, so you're getting top to bottom coverage. The other thing is, like, if I know all the fish are on the bottom, I'll throw a longer cast, keep the sighter stalled out, and let it get really vertical so I know. The big thing, Griff, is just trusting the system. And I think I can't really see what you're doing, so it's hard for me to give you like a super accurate diagnosis, but I wouldn't worry. I would trust the system. If you're having a lot of problems with it, I would say fish heavier. You might be fishing a thicker leader formula. So maybe bump your beads up, keep hitting the bottom, and kind of figure out how quick it takes you to tick the bottom, and then you can lighten your beads up after that so you can get longer, better drifts. But I would say play around with your bead weights and see at what point in your drift you're ticking the bottom, and then recalibrate from there. So hope that helps. All right, this is coming from Andy from North Carolina. Again, so basically, Andy is Euro nymphing with a 9-foot 6-weight, just like our friend from Canada. And he's asking about the Echo Shadow 2 in a 10-foot 3-weight, which I own 4 of them. They're awesome. So he doesn't want to carry multiple rods. And yes, long story short, the Echo Shadow 2 is going to be able to throw dry flies to indicator fish and to Euro nymph. It truly is a hybrid rod. I highly recommend the 10-foot 3-weight. And you were asking about having an extra spool. I wouldn't do that. I would just fish a weight forward 3-weight floating line, fish a really, really long butt section on your Euro leader. So if you want to go to those other techniques, just switch the leader out, you're good to go. And if you have some extra money left over from that tip on not buying a spool, check out the 10.5 or the 11-foot Echo Shadow X. For North Carolina, I used to fish down there a lot. I would say go 10.5 foot 3-weight Echo Shadow X, and that'll still huck a fly line just fine. So Andy W, I hope that helps. All right, this question is coming from Frank F. So it says, any tips for chasing the ever elusive wild brown trout in the Conway? No need the spot burn in the video. Can just say, you know, the Shenandoah National Park, WMA. Those guys are pretty disconcerting compared to the brookies. I don't have a problem spot burning the Conway with brown trout, Frank, because they're not there anymore. When I was in college, Virginia Department of Game and Fish went in there and shocked out most of them and either threw them on the banks or they relocated some of them to Mossy Creek. So it's not that they're elusive because they're just not there. I don't think electroshocking, I don't think they probably got 100% of the brown trout out. I haven't fished that in, I don't know, 10 years. But after that electroshocking, their numbers went off a cliff. So they're very, very few and far between in that drainage. But man, I love that river. I spent a lot of time over there. All right, Frank's second question. What are some techniques for managing odd drifts on tiny creeks? Thinking where the fish are stacked around a pool or a beaver dam, or coming around a sunken tree where it's practically still on top, but rushing fast down low. I would say just add some more diverse casts to your arsenal. So things like curved casts, and then just more advanced mending techniques like aerial mends. So stack mending, things like that are really going to help you reduce drag forces on your line and get you better drifts. And then you also asked, just curious if you ever got into fishing salt around Maryland. I read there are more drum around the area now with warmer water, and I've been considering booking a guide. So Frank, I have only fished in Maryland in the salt for like striped bass and bluefish. I don't know about the drum fishing, but Richie Farino at District Angling could definitely point you in the right direction and get you set up with a great guide. So I will link District Angling's information down below. But great questions, and hope you get into some drum in Maryland. All right, Patrick G. On a Euro setup with a heavily weighted jig fly as the anchor or the point, the one that drags the bottom, at about 18 inches up, I have a tag, usually a hare's ear or some type of generic nymph, usually about 6 inches of tag tied to the main stem with a surgeon's knot. How do I keep that tag fly from tangling on the main stem? I usually just lightly roll cast, no false casting, with a small flick of my wrist, and I still get my tag tangled after a few casts. Is there some kind of trick to avoid this? Great questions, Patrick G. So you really can't roll cast like you would like with a traditional floating line on a Euro rig because the line doesn't have the mass to turn it over. What's probably happening is you're not giving it enough acceleration on the backswing and your flies are crossing through the air, if that makes sense. When you're doing a Euro cast, it's a really wristy cast, and it's a lot like tennis or badminton or ping pong. You want to give it a nice firm backhand and feel those flies get tight on the upswing. And once they get tight, you can hook your wrist around, creating tension as you're drawing that oval, and you'll notice you'll have a lot less tangles. If it's kind of like a sloppier cast and it bounces in the air and you're not keeping tension through the whole oval, you're gonna see a lot more tangles happen that way. And especially if you're roll casting and you're trying to roll cast and you're getting the flies up this way, they're coming at you and they're probably gonna wrap in the air. So try to have a more ovular cast and stay tight to your flies through the entire swing. And I know that you'll have less tangles. Great question. This is from Dave O. How did you become a fishing guide, and any aspirations of opening up a fly shop or a resort at some point? Well, Dave, I've been in the fly fishing world since I was 14, you know, and I've always wanted to be a fishing guide since I was 14. I mean, that just wasn't seen as like an acceptable career path, especially coming from the East Coast. It's just not, people just don't really do it full time, at least in the DC area where I grew up. So it really wasn't until I was in Seattle, still working in fly shops at 25, that, you know, I took it more seriously and was taking steps to become a fishing guide. Then once I got into New Mexico, I started guiding and learned a lot of great things. And then I was able to go out on my own and start About Trout, which has been really a dream come true. But great question. So yeah, I've wanted to be a fishing guide since the second I knew what it was, and I couldn't be happier. So, but in terms of opening a shop, right now it's not in the future for me, but we'll see what happens there. Great question. What do I wish I would have known 10 years ago when you started? Yeah. Well, I guess I started. I guess I started 20 years ago, but 10 years ago, even at age 20, I wish I would have known that it's not about the fly, you know, presentation over everything. And if you're going through these comments, especially with Euro nymphing, a lot of people are talking about ticking the bottom, bouncing the bottom, and that's not necessarily true. When I give presentations to fly clubs, I always talk about a trout first approach, and that's what I wish I would have known. So basically, thinking about a trout first, thinking about their biology based on the season, what type of water they might be holding in, are they suspended, are they on the bottom, are you looking at the water and they're eating dries off the top, and then considering the type of river that you're fishing or creek. Is it fast, is it slow, is it high, is it rocky, and letting the river and what the trout are doing dictate how you rig. It's better to use the wrong fly in the right way. There are no like magic flies. There has to be technique and thought behind it. So trout first, fishing with intent, thinking about those things. I wish I would have known, because even, you know, in my 20s or early 20s, you know, I was still, oh, it's this fly, this fly, this fly, and it's not. I can tell you if I'm guiding Euro nymphing or if I'm guiding midge rigs out of the San Juan, my number one consideration is depth and weight. And then after that, everything's gonna build off that, because I wanna put my flies in front of the fish's face, whether they're suspended on the bottom or they're eating dries or midging up top. So Dave, that's an excellent question, and I think that's it for me. Do you think beards, or what's an easy tip most of your clients miss out on? That's whether it's newer anglers or intermediate anglers, it's line management is the big one. So like too much slack, but the biggest one is holding the line and then holding the rod rather than putting your line through your rod hand and managing the slack, because they'll hook a fish, slack will get introduced into the system, and we lose a lot of fish that way. So line management and also controlling your slack would be, I think, the big one. Why can't you catch more fish? It's because you haven't booked a trip with About Trout yet. Shameless plug, abouttrout.com. I'm just kidding. But hey, if you're not rooting for yourself, who will, right? Do you think beards help or hurt with stealth on the water? That's a good one. So like right now, my mom's side of the family hasn't kicked in. I'm not really tanning up. So I think with kind of that pastier Irish skin in the winter, I definitely want the beard because it's gonna dampen the glare reflecting off my face. When I start to tan up, I'll shave the beard off. It'll keep me a little cooler out there in the summer. But I think definitely for wintertime fishing, I like to grow my scarf and then just dampen the reflectiveness off my face. I think definitely more helpful, especially in those low flat light conditions. And what's your order when the fish aren't eating? Pattern, color, size. So back to my point about what I wish I would have known 10 years ago. The first thing I'm gonna do if I'm in a really fishy spot, I know that they're there, I'm gonna mess around with the depth of where I'm presenting my flies. So either moving an indicator, adding weight, reducing weight. And then after that, I think size and color would come after that. So like if I'm on the wand and they're being super picky, I know my depth's right for whatever reason, they've locked in on a certain size of midge, I'm gonna start dropping my sizes down, and then if that doesn't work, then I'll start messing around with colors. But the first thing I'll always do is try to adjust depth and weight and see where I can't intercept those fish in the water column. So great question. And really appreciate the kind words, Dave O. So I answered a few of these because I had shot this video, but it was in time lapse. So this next one is coming from Matt F, and that should wrap up the email portion of the questions, and then I'll go dive into the comment section. So Matt F, what is your routine for line, rod, reel, waders, and boot maintenance? Are you cleaning your line after each trip? Curious to hear what program a hardworking guide employs. Matt, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I am probably the worst person to ask. I don't clean my fly lines. Not that you shouldn't, you should clean your fly lines, but I just beat the snot out of my gear. I throw my boots in the back of my Subaru, let it marinate, you know, get that nice wet smell in the car, get me in the zone for my next day out in the water. Really, in terms of like maintenance, it's just tying, just volumes of tying. But in terms of like boots and waders, I'll usually get 300 days out of a pair of boots, like blow them out. So anywhere from like a full season to like a season and a half on the boots, depending on how much boat guiding I'm doing. I usually just guide in my Crocs in the summer or my muck boots in the winter. And then with my waders, you know, I will say I do beat them up, but once I feel a pinhole leak, I'll flip them inside out, hit them with some alcohol, and I'll patch them, because there's very few things you can control, but your personal comfort in terms of how you dress, layer, and take care of your waders is one of them. But yeah, man, I'm horrible with taking care of my stuff. Right now I have 3 rods in my Subaru out of their tubes and 4 pieces in the back seat. So don't do as I say, not as I do, I guess. Take care of your stuff and it will take care of you. And then how often are you changing bugs throughout the day? Are you a one fly dude if you were catching them, or in the mindset of wondering what else might work? Matt, great questions. So where you stand on something depends on where you sit. Like when I'm in guide mode and we're whacking fish, like I got the rig dialed in, I'm not gonna mess with it, right? My clients are having fun, they have smiles on their faces. I'm not gonna use them as lab rats. What I will do is on my day off, you know, I get to go fish with my guide buddies all the time for some research and development. Also, you know, researching what beer flavors are my new favorites. But that's when I'm gonna try that weirdo goofy stuff. Like if I've had a pattern in my head for a while, sometimes if we're just crushing it, I'll switch it out. But usually I'm gonna save all that research and development for like days off. So go test patterns on my off days, fishing with guide buddies, trying weird different things, because I wanna make sure my clients are in fish having a great time. Now, if the fishing is tough, you cannot let your clients see you fail. So I will change my depth, my weight, my flies, and I will figure it out until I get them back into fish. Yeah, I'm gonna do what I have to do to get my people on fish, or when I'm fishing personally, I'm gonna change as many times as I need to kind of find that magic combination, or to find that combination of depth, fly, and weight. So I hope that answers your question there. Great question. All right, we're gonna do the comment section now. I'm gonna have a beverage, Diet Coke. Send the check, Coke. All right, this is from Wesley W. Question, more of an update on your leader setups for most common situations, if anything has changed or updated. Thanks, man. Thank you, Wesley. Nope, I would say most of the time I'm fishing just a straight 4X leader to a tippet ring, like 20 feet of straight 4X or 30, and then I'll fish Norm's sighter or leader formula tapered down to a 2X sighter for dry dropper stuff, grease sighter stuff. So I use those too. The next question is coming from Josh W. Fly fishing for trout can seem a bit intimidating at times with so many different types of flies and all kinds of colors and sizes as well. My question is, what's a handful of flies that you wouldn't leave home without, regardless of time of year or your area of the US you are fishing? Understanding there's always a fly or technique that's going to be great one day and not so well the other. Great question, Josh. I mean, day in and day out, nymphing is going to produce. So top 5 nymphs would be like an RS2, a thread Frenchie, an ecstasy egg, a girdle bug, like a Pat's rubber legs, and then I would say like some sort of hair's-ear variant, like a waltz worm, and that should do the trick anytime, anywhere. So those 5 flies. But again, I keep getting these questions about flies, and it's think trout first. Think where are the fish in the water column or where they're holding in the river, and then based on the maybe water clarity, water temperature, how fast the river is moving, things like that, let the river tell you how to rig, right? So fast river, heavier, right? If it's runoff, maybe fish the edges because that's where the trout will be. So rather than thinking about like a magic fly, those are my 5 confidence flies. If you ask, 10 guides, you're gonna get 10 different answers. But think trout first, and that's gonna make everything a lot easier for you, I promise. So good question. Lucas T, what beer is best? Free. Free is the best beer, always free. My favorite is Bell's Two-Hearted IPA from Two-Hearted IPA from Bell's Brewing Company, but free beer, it's hard to beat free, man. All right, this is from Brandon I. Any areas in New Mexico for decent sized cutthroat trout? I would assume you're referring to like all the Instagram trout that you see. Those are all from lakes, and just think about it, right? That's as much as I feel like I want to give out on the internet. You got to put that boot leather in, and you will find them with a lot of trial and error. But I don't think it's a big secret that all the big cutthroats that you see all over the internet are coming from lakes. So that's a step in the right direction. And then you say you're doing the bass challenge in New Mexico and don't know where spotted bass would be. Any ideas? I don't, but I know for a fact the nice folks at Los Pinos Fly Shop in Albuquerque do know that information, so I'll link that down below. And anyone else that's trying to do the bass challenge, feel free to give them a shout. All right. Sabian G, he's coming in with the heat. Question 1, what accolades do you have as a competitive ribbon dancer? I'm the best ever. I'm the best to ever do it. Those are my accolades. You said in a previous video that your rap career failed. Is that because you're trash at rap, or nobody thought to look at the Irish Arabic in northern New Mexico for the next great rapper? For sure. If you can, if so, can you lay down some fresh lines? Sabian, I can rap off the top, never stop, never drop, never flop till I'm stacking my guap. That cheddar is so much better. Check it out, multicolor sweater. Whatever. Anyway, see, I'm rhyming right there. It doesn't matter. People don't see the vision, man. So I had to become a fly fishing guide. That's a sad story, but who knows, in the future, maybe I'll ditch this and become the greatest rapper ever. I'm just trash. What's your PB trout, personal best, overall, and favorite fish that you've ever caught? My biggest trout came from Tennessee on a mouse, and I taped it at 28 inches. My favorite fish would probably be that trip I took last spring, catching an Apache and a Gila trout. That was really, really special. And then like big fish, in salt, I've caught things like roosters, jacks, baby tarpon. I've lost way more big fish than I have landed. I mean, I've lost some big salmon, big tarpon, missed some big roosters, so it's a tier. Have you fished elsewhere besides the West? Yes. If you're talking about I fished every state in the Intermountain West except Nevada, but I've fished California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, Bosnia, Costa Rica, Mexico, Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, and I'm sure I'm missing some others, but I've been all over. Let's see. Garrett Wade, I see you, and yes, the next video that I drop will be a tying video. I know you guys love those. Really appreciate the kind words. And with winter, tying season, I'm gonna be putting out a lot more fly tying content. There's a lot of crazy things happening behind the scenes right now. So I hear ya, and they will be coming out. Did we do it? Did we get through all the questions? Oh, this one's from David F. Ooh, this is a very good question. How do you determine how much weight, tungsten or shot, to put on your Euro rigs? Thanks for the videos. Thank you, David. That's a great question. So, you're gonna be, how much, I would just break it down in the simplest form. If you're fishing short drifts, use more weight, right? Because you want your flies to come to depth quicker. If you're fishing longer drifts, generally, lighter beads. Now, if it's high water and it's deep on the other side, then yeah, fish a light leader formula with heavy beads so they get to depth and you can stay on the bottom through the whole drift. If it's skinny water and you're fishing far away and you want a nice long drift, really, really light, maybe grease cider. But in general, again, think about where the fish are in the water column. Are they suspended? Are they down deep? Are they up top eating? And then match your rig to the prevailing conditions and trends. So let's take winter as an analogy. Let's say you're fishing a short, deep pool. You want to get to the bottom quick because it's winter, fish are on the bottom. Bump up your bead sizes because you want to come to depth faster. Let's say you're fishing like a medium depth run. You're making longer casts. You don't necessarily want your flies a third of the way into the drift to be ticking the bottom, right? You want a slow, nice long drift, so go lighter on that. And I hope that helps. That's an excellent question. That should be a whole nother video. Excellent question. Favorite indicator, airlock, and I also like corks. CORQ, a guide on the San Juan invented those, Ryan McRory. I like the tactical corks, they're tapered. And the nice thing about a tapered indicator is it will point where your flies are rather than like a spherical indicator, if that makes sense. So you kind of have an idea of where your flies are in the drifts. So corks, check them out. Airlock, check them out. Demo request about fly fishing where there's a lot of vegetation. I'll just throw up some clips of me fishing in vegetation. And Everett, you're gonna wanna learn what a bow and arrow cast is. I'll post that here. I grew up fishing Shenandoah National Park in Virginia, really tight, really brushy. Other things you might wanna learn are something like a curve cast. But I will post some clips of fishing in brushy creeks. So there you go. Thank you. Last one from Big Sky 406. I am a college student looking for a rod specifically for small creeks in the driftless area, mainly throwing midges and small dries. Was thinking about a 3-weight 7.5 footer. What are your recommendations for a price conscious buyer? I was looking at the Echo Carbon XL and the Orvis Clearwater. Echo Carbon XL, that I own 2 of them, and I have my Creekin rod is a 7 foot 3-inch 2-weight Carbon XL that I absolutely love. The Orvis Clearwater, double check the warranty on that. It might only be like a manufacturer's defect warranty. I know some of the Orvis kits, if you break them, you just gotta buy new rods. So depending on what model, but Echo probably has the best warranty in the business as well. Owning a Carbon XL as a Creekin stick, you can't go wrong. So Carbon XL. And I think that wraps it up, everybody. We did it, we made it. I really appreciate everybody's questions. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. Maybe this will become kind of like a quarterly thing, one per kind of seasonal change. But I really appreciate all the kind words and the emails that I didn't read publicly. And to those of you whose questions I didn't answer, out here, know that I emailed you back, so please check your inboxes. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for all your support. Really appreciate it. Thanks to my friends at Moccasin Fly Club for this awesome hat. And I hear you, the next video will be a fly tying video. So I'll see you on the next fly tying video. Peace.